intelligent, entertaining, aggressive, yet respectful, delicate, yet incisive, balanced, with success, and yet ultimately will largely go underappreciated in many parts, especially in the neutrals, maybe even under or unacknowledged altogether, as the narrative focuses on something else. Guys, believe it or not, I am not talking about Sean Butler's sex life. No, sir. I am, of course, talking about Big Ange Postecoglou and the incredible performance that was on display from the Lily Whites yesterday at the Etihad. It's not unfamiliar territory for Tottenham to be on the better end of a result against the best team in the world. We have done it enough times for Manchester City fans to consider us their bogey team, yet no team has gone to the Etihad under Pep Guardiola's reign and made them hold 4 without response. No team has beaten them in their last 50-odd games. And I think you'll find it very few and far between in the careers and the annals of history of the players on the pitch who were wearing sky blue to find when they last were on the receiving end of a 4-0 decisive victory against a team that has been accused of mediocrity, inconsistency, and a flattering to deceive approach to football that ultimately will be uncovered, unsuccessful and exposed at this level. I myself have been someone who has very recently said that whilst I very much appreciate Angeball, it was what I asked for, something like this. I think that the pendulum may have swung too far because I believe that there is a version of Angeball that is accessible, that only requires a dialing back of the measured and measurements in which we approach the game. And I thought that on paper, from all I've seen so far, I just think that those unnecessary vulnerabilities are going to remain because Ange, as much as I love him and I love the style and I love the philosophy, I really do, I have been guilty of thinking that his approach to the long game, that the need to embed a message and a narrative over the long run will eventually meet up with the reality. Where the rubber meets the road is that you're not afforded the patience and the timelines necessary to have that sort of message embedded where it will yield success at the Premier League. The average tenure of a manager is, 15 months? He's already past that. And on paper, the league position before yesterday, we were further back than last season. The first 10 games maybe set him up for an unrealistic expectation of what was to follow. And he is conscious of that, but also can't change that, and has been very consistent in his approach to the media where he doesn't let good performances or bad performance in isolation get in the way of the narrative or become too heavy a burden for him in terms of how he approaches each week as the manager of Tottenham. Yesterday, however, showed everything that I think and thought has been missing. It showed that we are good enough against the best. The narrative that the players are not good enough, technically that they're not capable of the sorts of football that yields success, that can get us to the promised land, is foolhardy. I just don't believe it. And those that do, fair enough. We all have our different crosses to bear in that regard. However, I think that the players are more than capable. There is a youth, an exuberance, a style of enthusiasm that was on display yesterday that when it clicks is unplayable. It's a joy to watch. One of the reasons why Tottenham are the most watched neutral team. But until now has obviously shown enough vulnerabilities where we are picked off at times by teams and systems that are more respectful and acknowledge the versions of Angeball that is on display and are set up to take advantage of them. Teams that don't, teams that care more about themselves and have enough confidence in their own version, their own vision, will approach Angeball how they see fit, and that makes for a fantastic match. And yesterday was a fantastic match. It could have gone either way. But I think that the narrative this morning in most of the neutral media will be, I say neutral media, the kind of big six media will be around Manchester City and the decline there. Will it be described as a short-term blip that is turning into medium-term, that's unforgivable, but ultimately explainable by the absence of some meaningful and key players in the likes of Rodri. We spoke only on Friday about Tottenham's lack of a Rodri or even a player that represents something like what he can offer, albeit not at his level. And the absence of it is also responsible in no small part for some of the volatility within Tottenham's performances this season. Or will the press be talking more about an endemic decline, something that is based primarily in, I don't know how they're going to describe it. Are they going to play it off as something around the fatigue of success? That in reality, it's just difficult to stay motivated when you've had so much success for such a long period of time. Maybe the players are getting older together. Maybe it's the transfer policy that the club have employed that until now has been brilliant, but all of a sudden is a problem. That they sold players and they didn't replace the GA contributions of the players that they sold with the players that they brought in. Who knows? There will be, excuse me, an incredible variety of different attempts to explain the reality that Manchester City are not quite the behemoth that they were in seasons past, and the opportunity for Liverpool and Arsenal, and probably them only this season, is there for the taking to finally break the dominance over the Premier League that Manchester City have enjoyed for so long. And you know what? There are plenty of channels out there that can focus on that, plenty of newspapers and plenty of eyeballs that will be more interested in that than Angeball and what is happening here. God, I am sweating. I'm sorry. I've got the flu. I'm horribly unwell. I just think that no good deed goes unpunished. As I said, I think that Ange wakes up this morning and will probably feel like he deserves more credit than is afforded him by the neutrals. And I think it's rightly so. I believe that everything that I asked for, everything I've been talking about, the dialing back, the 10% less foot to the floor, the 10% less motorway in third gear at 70 miles an hour, but at 10,000 revs, drop a gear, change the style a little bit, make your journey a little bit easier on the engine, easier on the ears, easier on the eyes by factoring in the context of the situation. And, excuse me, and success can happen. Is it still a long shot? Sustainable, consistent success? 100%. It is a long shot. And that's basically where I will maintain my own persistence in this narrative. Those of you who blame Daniel Levy for the Spursy vibe, the lack of ambition to get us to the promised land, listen, I know I am on the other side of the popular opinion on this one. I'm not going to join you just because it is a heavy weighting in the fan base. I just don't ascribe the same amount of weighting to the influence of what determines success as you do to just the internal factors at the club. That notwithstanding, I do also acknowledge that he is a significant contributor to what happens at the football club, and his time at the club is an ingredient that can be added to the cocktail of variables when you're trying to figure out who is to blame. But I ultimately take every season in isolation on its own merit and think of the variables that impact and influence those things. And this season is different to last season. And the external factors that we have to overcome are things that are outside of Tottenham's control and yet are, for me, have been and will continue to be far more influential in terms of the variables that affect it than just Daniel Levy. I think we give him too much credit for our lack of success. It is important, he is influential, and it's significant, but it's not the biggest, in my opinion, not even the top 5 factors. What I would say is people like Hugo Lloris who jump on that bandwagon and point a finger at him and say he's responsible for the lack of culture and the despondency, the lack thereof of despondency of not winning or the Champions League final is palpable, and that's a problem. It's a problem that affects Tottenham Hotspur. Hugo Lloris, you are the captain of that football club. You have more direct influence in the dressing room and the minds and the ears of the players than the guy in the boardroom who writes checks does. And he writes a lot of checks and very healthy checks. Could he write bigger ones? At times, possibly, probably, for sure. Has he made mistakes? 100%. There's no part of me that would sit here and absolve him of responsibility. However, I just think that the Spursy thing, the reason why we can get up for the Manchester City games and then we drop ourselves and fall well short against the likes of Ipswich is more of an individualistic aspect that you have to figure out what's going on in the minds of the players. Why is it that they can put in performances like they did yesterday and then not against Ipswich or Southampton or Fulham or whoever's coming up in the next few games. We will see what happens. Is this the start of the resurgence? Is this the start of seeing the blend of Angeball that maintains the philosophical continuity that we all want to see? Wonderful football. And my God, was the football yesterday a joy to watch. From my bed and with the bottle of cough syrup next to me and Strepsils, I was cheering with a raspy throat, as we put 4 past them. It was sensational to watch, but it also blended that delicate need for context, and we did it fantastic. Again, the game could have gone a different way. It really could have done. 2-0 to us at halftime, could have been 2-0 to Manchester City after 10 minutes. Erling Haaland didn't take his chances. When he doesn't score, do Manchester City have enough goal scorers elsewhere in their team now? Probably not, but I just do not think it's reasonable to sit here and say that the reason why Tottenham won was because Manchester City were poor. They weren't bad yesterday. They were a good team. It was a good game of football end to end, but Tottenham played it brilliantly. In micro isolation, things like Bissouma having a yellow card, a risk. And then when there was fracases and moments where frustrations boiled over and he was in there shoving players, other Tottenham players came in to shove other people, but they weren't shoving Manchester City players. They were shoving Bissouma out of the way. Not just one of them, several of them, in several different occasions, recognising that A, he's on a yellow card and going down to 10 men in that stage of the game would have been silly. Possibly Bissouma has got history and form doing that. Think back to Luton last season. Unnecessary dives, I think it was him. It was him. But also the fact that we don't have Bentancur for the next 6 games in the Premier League. We don't have a 6, a natural beast of a 6 that we so desperately need, I believe, as part of the gap analysis. But Bissouma is the best fit for it, for what we have at the moment. And if he got a red card at the same time as Bentancur's absence, then, nightmare stuff. Unnecessary, again, vulnerabilities. And Bissouma was kind of a little bit sloppy, didn't realise or think about that. He let himself get carried away. But the other players stepped up, got him out of there. Clever, smart, intelligent, in-game management from the team. This system, as I've said to you 1,000 times, in my interpretation of it, puts a lot of responsibility, abdicates quite a lot of responsibility from the manager, from the coach, to the players. And says, over to you to figure out how that looks. As long as you keep to the framework, then by extension, I'll let you figure out how you want to do it. And when it clicks, it's unplayable, it's brilliant to watch, but it requires that wavelength, that bandwidth, that kind of telepathy of everybody on the same page. And that requires leadership across the park. It requires intelligence, and it requires self-belief and confidence in the model. And when you look at the players in yesterday's performance, you are seeing the combination of players that have stepped up this season, that have thrived in new positions that have been finally afforded to them, who they themselves have recognised that was always their strongest position, but until now wasn't given the chance enough to play there. And then the re-emergence of players that have had volatility in their form, that have come back into the team and really done a fantastic job. And on top of that, players that are, by design, squad players that have come in through needs must, and that have stepped up and put in their best shift of their recent career at Tottenham Hotspur. Ben Davies and Radu Dragusin yesterday were brilliant. Ben Davies, solid Ben, 7 out of 10 every time. A lot of Tottenham fans think he is surplus to requirements, should have left the club a long time ago. I don't subscribe to that. I think you need your show ponies and you need your workhorses. You need the people that are the flair players, the James Maddisons, the the Sonny, the whoever. You need those sorts of players that maybe are going to be the game changer, the difference in certain situations, but that, that maybe don't carry the influence in every part of their game at all times. And when they're on, it's fantastic. But sometimes they can sort of drop the ball and then you feel the impact. But with Ben Davies, you're never going to see like an unbelievable world-class performance all the time. He's not that sort of player, but what you are going to see is consistency and a sort of a dependability that within his own limitations versus other people in the squad, that he is going to be towards the top end of his ceiling most of the time. And yesterday was no different. Come of the hour, come of the man. Ben Davies doesn't let you down. Dependable Ben. And it's great to see. Alongside Radu Dragusin, who I'm guilty of saying last week, I don't think he suits Angeball. I think that the high line, his lack of pace, hasn't really blended too well into the Premier League, and rightly so, it hasn't really had too much of an opportunity. Yesterday, with the ability for the team to step back, to not be gung-ho and front foot and over the top with their we have to attack at every opportunity vibes, we stepped back a little bit. We tucked in and we respected Manchester City and the situation, and that afforded him to show us what he is capable of. And it was by far his best performance in a Tottenham shirt, and one that I think, no disrespect to those Cootie lovers out there, but one that commands at least a continued stay, regardless of Romero's viability and fitness for the next game in midweek. I think it's against Roma. I'm sure Romero is injured following his toe injury and his attempt to play through it in Argentina. When you were listening to Ange in the pre-match press conference, it sounded like it was, from his words, it was like more of a forced club-based decision to tell him to have some time off, spend it with his newborn daughter and his family. Congratulations to Cutie. But I do think that on the back of that, and also Radu Dragusin showing us a bit more of his capabilities yesterday in a system that hopefully, like I say, will continue to now bed in a little bit more context and be aware of the time to throw caution to the wind and the time to sit back and absorb. And we did it brilliantly, and he was a massive part of that. Pedro Porro and Destiny Udogie. I think Destiny Udogie probably is not going to be on anybody's top 5 performance list yesterday, but I thought he was fantastic. I thought he handled the defensive risk that was, the defensive responsibilities that came from the risk of the likes of Foden et al. On that right-hand side or our left-hand side. I thought he was, if understated, I thought he was very powerful and palpable in his body work and his strength and his positioning. I think he didn't really make any mistakes as far as I can recall. But like I say, because of the performance, the outperformance, the surprising domination of other players on the team sheet, I think that he probably won't get the credit that he deserves, but it was a very solid performance from him. And I think that generally speaking, he did very well against one of the best right-sided forwards in the game in Phil Foden whilst he was on the pitch. On the other side, Pedro Porro, similar story. Brilliant, got back, defended like an absolute sort of little pocket rocket. And then, as I said to you last week, this guy could play in a number of positions. If you're talking about versatility and adaptability, that finish that he had for that goal, for the third goal, was sensational. And that third goal was probably the most crucial goal. A wonderful worked piece of play, starting with who we're going to talk about in a second. But Pedro Porro, just another dominant performance, and someone that can chip in with the sort of composed, powerful, confident finishes that don't often materialise from players that traditionally play in that position, in the right back. But his responsibility to get forward, to contribute to the midfield, and also to be on the end of well-worked moves has yielded results, not to an inconsistent or an infrequent amount of times now, and something that we should be very much appreciative of, because in him we do have a very capable player. Any intentions to sell him, as I mentioned before, should be resisted. I know that it will be difficult to keep hold of him should Real Madrid come calling, but if we can, I think he is, just a leader, an intelligent player, a passion merchant. Fight is in his DNA, and I love his work rate, and he's got a lot of responsibility, as does Destiny Udogie, in that role, to get forward, to be a linchpin in the build-up and in the conversion, but also to get back when necessary. And he did that yesterday, and I think he benefited again from a little bit more of a reserved and sort of pull back, realistic approach to how to play Manchester City in that second half. That said, that defence, whilst putting on a brilliant performance, wasn't doing it alone. And even despite the support of players around them further up the pitch who got back and put in meaningful performances, who we're going to talk about, James Maddison, for example, I'll come to him in just a second. However, they still had plenty of chances on goal. And if it wasn't for Vicario, a different performance, different game, different day. Vicario put in, maybe from memory, 4 or 5 top draw saves. One of the best shot stoppers in the Premier League. That much is, I think, undeniable. People say, brilliant shot stopper, poor at other areas of his game. I agree. I think that their shot stopping is a fundamental thing. I think that it's unforgivable unless you are a brilliant shot stopper. You have to be a great shot stopper. That's like the kind of basis of your requirements. Everything else, your ability to distribute, your leadership, your ability to command your area, your strength, your decision making, all of those things, the very best goalkeepers are excellent in those areas and shot stopping. And the ones that get to nearly the top, nearly the best, but don't quite make it are usually brilliant at shot stopping, but also have vulnerabilities. I think that Vicario still has lots of vulnerabilities within other areas of his game that he needs to work on and improve, but he's 27, this is young for a goalkeeper, plenty of time on his side, and there's a lot to like about Vicario, especially his lack of cares about telling other players on his team if he thinks that they could be doing more. The only thing I would argue is that if you're not getting the A, B's and C's of your own game right, then sometimes it can look a little bit like that. I'm pointing one finger when three are pointing back when it comes to the distribution of accountability, and the visibility of him doing it on the pitch sometimes can grate me when he doesn't command his own area in certain areas. However, yesterday I think he did everything, ticked the box, and he was sensational. One of his best performances in a Tottenham shirt. Reminded me all the way back to the Chelsea game when he was phenomenal. His timing, his decision making was great. He just, unfortunately, on that day ended up becoming too much to bear. But yesterday, brilliant. The back four, fantastic. But there were still chances, as you would expect against Manchester City, that weren't taken. But the strength of our defending started with additional work from the guys in front. James Maddison, 2 goals on his birthday, a point to prove. Dejan Kulusevski, who we're going to come to in a second, comes in to the 10 role, gives Maddison competition for his spot, is playing in the position that Kulusevski himself has said is his best position, his favourite position. And finally, we see this ability for him to run with the ball, to use his bodywork, his strength, and his delicate feet. He's got incredible delicate feet for someone who's big and strong and can do all of the other things, the galloping like a racehorse that he can do, alongside his engine, his incredible stamina. A new version of Dejan Kulusevski has emerged this season, and one that even the staunchest doubters around his belief last season, or your belief in his ability last season, need to kind of, I think, unravel that a little bit, recognise his age, recognise the uniqueness of his skill set. And whilst, yes, last season there was a lot of merit to the argument of his predictability when he was caught on the right-hand side and was kind of standing there waiting for the ball and didn't have the pace, the acceleration and the footwork skill set to get past players like other tricky Vinicius Junior type wingers can do. But he offers a whole different skill set, one that is very, very rare in forward players that can do a little bit of everything when given the space. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of big name clubs coming, looking and sniffing for him. And he is also someone that I think that Tottenham Hotspur need to keep, because if you're looking for unique value in him, you have it. Yesterday he was sensational, and James Maddison has been a victim of 2 things. One is the emergence of Dejan Kulusevski as competition and offering something different, and his form being so superior. But also James Maddison, I think, resting on his laurels a little bit with regards to his own performance, possibly because he didn't have any competition, possibly because he is a big game player, a moments player, a cherry on top type of player that Leicester fans warned us about, but who can go missing in games. I'm not sure what it is. I don't know whether or not maybe he's a very intelligent guy, James Maddison. You can tell when you listen to his post-match and pre-match press conferences, his interviews. He thinks about his answers. He's a nice guy. He's a likeable guy. But there has a little bit, for me, been missing in his makeup with regards his effort off the ball, with regards his willingness to do things outside of the kind of the creative make-up play on the ball. Yesterday we saw a version of him that elevates his potential now to something of a different level if he can recreate and replicate and kind of create a template of that effort against all sorts of teams. He got back and defended like Wayne Rooney would do back in the day for United. He was an ever-present off the ball, just in front of Dragusin and Ben Davies. He was winning the ball back. He was feisty. He was aggressive. He was drawing fouls left, right and centre, as he usually does. That's not something I'll ever take away from him. But he offered things that you don't usually see. And that inclusion into the makeup of the cocktail of things that went our way was absolutely undeniable. And something that I need to see more of for me to think you've got a real headache here, and around how do you find space for both of them. At the moment, if only one of them, Dejan and Maddison, can play in the 10, and you need to have someone like Brennan Johnson on the right and Sonny on the left, for example, then I think you still argue that you give it to Dejan. But after 2 goals yesterday, 2 meaningful goals, 2 wonderfully worked goals where Maddison was at the at the start of the move, the genesis of it, and at the end of it, both situations. In terms of teamwork, tick. In terms of creativity, tick. In terms of effort, willingness, desire, and a point to prove, all of those things, he gets a 5-star from me. It's just whether he does that in the next game, and the game after that, in the games that are not televised, in the games that are fly under the radar and only the very, very invested eyes will be watching. And that's a question mark that you always have to ask, not just of him, but of every flashy flair player that is a big game player, but sometimes can go missing, and when you wouldn't consider them to be flat track bullies. I'm not sure what's better, a flat track bully or a flair player. As you go through the ranks, as you go through the levels as a Tottenham fan, as a fan of any football club, and you start to try to get to the top, you're going to play a higher frequency of teams that want to respect your football and will sit in and try and pick you off. Therefore, you need a mixture of players that turn up for the big games and also that are there for the cold Thursday nights or cold Wednesday night in Stoke, whatever it was, whatever the phrase was. And I think that James Maddison has everything. He just needs to be a little bit more of the everything. And yesterday's performance was rightly so commendable, and I think he was right to get the man of the match. As I say, Kulusevski was fantastic for a different reason. Unbelievable. Sonny, probably not on the top 5 players for me, on the top 5 Tottenham players list, but he played wonderfully well. Got involved, old school Sonny, driving at the players, driving at Kyle Walker, made Kyle Walker look like an old man. 32-year-old Sonny, give him a little bit of pace, give him some motivation, give him a bee in his bonnet, and give him a target that, don't forget, is still one of the top 5 fastest players in the Premier League at his age. And you have an incredible thing to see. It's a joy to behold to see Sonny with the ball at his feet, still got that ability to dip his shoulder and take on his man and yield wonderful success. Sonny was fantastic yesterday. You know what? Even Timo Werner was brilliant to see him get his assist. I will argue about Timo. I'm someone who's always got Timo's back for what it's worth. I like the guy. Boost Gumps. He won me over with Boost. You have me at Boost Gumps, Timo. But what I would say is, let's not pretend like you didn't have your eyes to the ground when you whipped that ball in for Brennan Johnson for the 4th goal. You didn't look up. So it was a wonderful, well-placed cross. Fantastic, not taking it away from you. However, I would have been like, wow, even more so had I seen you look up and pick the pass rather than assuming it was there. And as I've always said to you guys, that is the difference between a £20 million winger and a £50, £60 million one. It's the ability to look up whilst running at pace, to pick your guy and then execute on the cross. And he got everything done yesterday, but the fact that he didn't look up and pick it, he either knew that Brennan Johnson was going to be there, which you'd hope he would be, given the system dictates that, or he got lucky. Either way, I'm not going to take it away from him because he needs a bit of things to go his way, and hopefully that will be a catalyst for him. But yeah, brilliant work from him when he came on, but also fantastic from Sonny. Brennan Johnson can't get a minute at the moment because it's difficult to fit everybody in. But what is he, 7 goals, 8 goals this season now? Sensational from him again, just to be on the end of things. You know, he's again, Ange Postecoglou's subs yesterday were just sensational. The timing of them, everything was right. Everything went well. Just when Sonny's had 65 minutes, you bring on someone who's faster than Sonny, who gives another dimension, another thing for Manchester City to worry about. Brennan Johnson, pace. We've got so much pace in this team that when you're playing against teams that are chasing the game and have to come out, then you to have those options on the bench, it's incredible. For those of you, again, I'll go back to this. I'm going to hark on this because I know it's unpopular, but I'm going to keep being unpopular in your eyes when I say this to you. For those of you who think that our game, our team, and our capabilities aren't there, I disagree. Our bench has never been stronger. The gap between our first 11 and the rest has never been smaller. And the potential, the options and the skill sets that our squad have in their locker, on average, is more than enough to dominate most games and to get the results. The difference between success and failure is margins, and it's minute, and it's mentality. It's mentality. It's how do you get up for the Ipswich as well as you do for the Man City. And that is a thing that Ange has to figure out. That is a thing that the players have to figure out. And guys, yesterday we saw it all. We saw it all. Everything was great. The management was fantastic. The subs were fantastic. The leadership on the pitch in the micro and in the macro were superb. Let's do it against Roma. Let's get the 3 points on the bag. Let's qualify for the later stages of that cup. Then let's take on the next 4 games. I think are Chelsea, Southampton, Fulham and someone else. I forget. Bournemouth, is it? Or Brighton? No, Bournemouth, I think. 4 games, 3 of them winnable. 4, maybe there's probably 10 points on offer there realistically if we can turn this into a catalyst for more of the same against a different style of opposition. There's no reason to not be optimistic. There's no reason to think that this is just going to be a flash in the pan. If you have doubts, I get it. Why wouldn't you? There are plenty of reasons to sit there and look at the history of Tottenham Hotspur and think that we are always capable of doing this against City and always capable of being Spursy. But Spursy is something that the players need to figure out and the manager needs to figure out. And I just think that yesterday's demonstration was that we have everything we need. And Angeball dialed it back to 10% that I looked for, that I'm wanting to see. And it should be celebrated, encouraged, implored, and exciting. But we now have evidence of the template. That's it, guys. That's it from me. Long one. Apologies. Like, subscribe, and comment. And as always, bye-bye.